Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. This is a new channel, so I will appreciate guys if you hit the subscribe button. So what do we have here? Another 20 exam practice questions for Microsoft Entra ID or Azure Fundamentals AZ900. Before we start with the questions, guys, you can go over to the website Pro Exams IT. You'll find there cheap exam materials for different types of certifications. Also, different and more exam practice questions for this certification you can find in my Udemy course. The link is in the description. So let's start. Question 21. You are reviewing different compliance standards and cloud offerings in Microsoft Azure. Match each term to its correct description. So we have 4 terms and we have the description here. So basically we need to see which one is which. So let's start with GDPR. What is this? So we have 4 options: a European regulation focused on data privacy and protection, or a cloud environment designed specifically for US government, or defines international standards, or defines security and compliance standards used by the US government. And I know, guys, you know this. This is basically a European regulation focused on data privacy and protection. So what we're going to do, basically, we're just going to drag and drop this. So they are connected now. It is a match now. So ISO, what is ISO? A cloud environment defines international standards or defines security and compliance? Well, ISO, it defines basically international standards across multiple industries. So we're going to drag it right here. And now we have Azure Government. What? We have only 2 options: a cloud environment designed specifically for US government, or define security and compliance standards used by the US government. And that will be a cloud environment designed specifically for US government. And for NIST, it's basically defines security and compliance standards. So basically, this is it. Let's submit. Everything is correct. And we're going to moving on to the next questions, which is: an organization must deploy its cloud infrastructure in Microsoft Azure while complying with strict US federal regulations, including requirements for isolated environments and controlled access limited to screened personnel. Which type of customer is this requirement specifically designed for? A European organization with data residency requirements, a multinational corporation operating across multiple regions, a United States government entity, or a startup focusing on global scalability? Well, that will be a United States government entity. So the scenario refers to Azure Government, which is designed specifically for US federal, state, and local government organizations, compliance with strict regulations, isolated cloud regions accessible only to authorized personnel. And for example, if an organization requires government-level compliance, restrict physical and logical access, basically it fits Azure Government, US government entities. The other options, such as multinational corporation operating across multiple regions, basically focuses on global reach. A startup focusing on global scalability, this is basically concerned with growth and performance. And a European organization with data residency requirements, this relates to regional data laws like GDPR. Let's move on to question 23. An administrator needs to deploy and manage multiple resources in Microsoft Azure in a consistent and repeatable way. They want to ensure that all resources are deployed together, managed as a single logical unit, controlled using role-based access and policies. Which statement correctly describes the feature that enables this capability? Azure Resource Manager provides a centralized management layer for deploying, organizing, and controlling resources. Azure Resource Manager provides automatic scaling of resources based on demand. Azure Resource Manager provides physical hardware allocation within Azure data centers. Azure Resource Manager provides direct network connectivity between on-premises and Azure. Which one is the right option here? And that will be the first one. Azure Resource Manager provides a centralized management layer for deploying, organizing, and controlling resources. So basically, ARM is the management layer of Azure that allows you to deploy resources using templates, organize resources into resource groups, apply RBAC and policies, manage everything consistently. For example, using the Azure Resource Manager, you can deploy a full environment, virtual machines plus network plus storage with one template and manage access using roles. Let's see the other options. Azure Resource Manager provides automatic scaling of resources based on demand. Scaling here is handled by services like virtual machine scale sets. Azure Resources Manager provides physical hardware location within Azure data centers. So this one, the users here do not manage physical infrastructure in Azure, and Azure Resource Manager provides direct network connectivity between on-premises and Azure. This is done using VPN gateway or express route. Let's move on to question 24. An administrator is deploying additional virtual machines in Microsoft Azure. During deployment, the administrator receives an error indicating that the maximum number of allowed resources for the subscription has been reached. The administrator confirms that the configuration is correct, sufficient permissions are assigned, resources are being deployed in a supported region. So what should the administrator do to proceed with the deployment? Create a new support request, restart the deployment process, change the resource group for deployment, delete existing resources to free up capacity. Well, that will be create a new support request. So Azure subscriptions have default service limits, such as number of virtual machines, CPU cores per region. When these limits are reached, you must request a quota increase, and this is done by creating a support request in Azure. For example, you reach the virtual CPU limit, then your deployment will fail, and then you need to submit quota to increase for increasing. Increase request, then it's going to be approved, and then deployment will be working. Other options, delete existing resources to free up capacity. This is not required if you want to scale beyond current limits. Change the resource group for deployment. Limits are applied at the subscription level, not the resource group level, and restart the deployment process. This does not resolve the quota limitations here. Question 25. A company deploys multiple resources in Microsoft Azure across different departments. The finance team needs to track costs based on departments, filter resources by environment, for example, production testing, generate reports without changing the resource structure. So which Azure feature should be used to meet these requirements? Management groups, Azure policy, resource groups, or tags? Well, that will be tags, guys. So tags, they're key value pairs applied to Azure resources that allow you to organize resources logically, to filter and search resources, basically track costs for billing purposes. For example, you can assign department, finance, environment, production, yeah? Then generate cost reports based on these tags, right? Let's have a look at the incorrect options. Resource groups. These are used to group resources for management. Management groups, they are used for governance across multiple subscriptions, and we have Azure policy. It is used to enforce rules and compliance. A company uses Microsoft Entra ID to manage user identities. The security team needs to, we have some requirement here, detect suspicious sign-in behavior, for example, unfamiliar locations, risky logins, automatically respond by enforcing actions such as requiring multi-factor authentication or blocking access, and continuously assess user risk levels based on detected threats. So which feature should be implemented to meet these requirements? Microsoft Defender for Cloud, Microsoft Entra Conditional Access, Azure AD Identity Protection, Azure Key Vault. Azure AD, Azure Identity Protection. This is now part of Microsoft Entra ID, and it is designed to detect risks-based sign-ins, to identify compromised accounts, and automatically trigger responses. Yeah. For example, if a user signs in from a new country unexpectedly, then identity protection flags it as risky and forces multi-factor authentication, or basically will block the access automatically. We have Microsoft Entra Conditional Access. This one is used to enforce access policies, but it relies on signals. We have Microsoft Defender for Cloud. This one focuses on securing cloud resources. And we have Azure Key Vault. This one is used for managing secrets, keys, and certificates. Now we have some true or false statements, or yes and or no. So the service level agreement for paid services in Microsoft Azure always guarantees a minimum uptime of 99.9%. Is that yes or no? No, that is a no, guys. So not all Azure services, they guarantee you this type of uptime. So some services offer higher SLAs. For example, 99.95 or 99.99. Others may offer lower or no SLA depending on configurations. Okay, deploying resources across multiple Azure regions can improve the overall SLA of an application. Yes or no? Well, this is a yes here, that's a true statement. Using multiple regions, it will reduce the risk of regional failure, it will improve overall availability, and basically this one is a key designed for high availability and disaster recovery. We have another true or false statement. Purchasing multiple Azure subscriptions automatically increases the SLA of a deployed application. Yes or no? Well, this one is a no. So SLA is based on service design and resource configuration, not on how many subscriptions you own. All right, question 30. A company hosts a public-facing application in Microsoft Azure. Recently, the application experienced abnormal traffic spikes originating from multiple sources, causing service disruption and making the application unavailable to legitimate users. The company needs a solution that can automatically detect and mitigate such large-scale malicious traffic without affecting normal user access. Which Azure feature should be implemented? Network Security Group, Distributed Denial of Service Protection, Azure Firewall, Azure Web Application Firewall. And that will be DDoS protection. So distributed denial of service protection basically will detect this type of service attacks. It will automatically mitigate large-scale traffic flows and will ensure application availability during attacks. For example, if thousands of malicious requests hit your app, then distributed denial of service protection filters and absorbs the attack, and legitimate users can still access the service. NSG. This one controls traffic using allow deny rules. Azure Firewall provides network-level filtering and security policies. And we have Azure Web Application Firewall, protects against web-based attacks, like SQL injection, not volumetric distributed denial of service attacks. Question 31. A company deploys several servers in Microsoft Azure, including a financial system that handles sensitive data. The security team requires strict network isolation for the financial system, separation from other application servers, controlled communication between environments. So which architecture should be implemented? Right. Assign different resource groups to the financial system and other servers. Place all servers in a single virtual network and use network security groups to restrict access. Or deploy the financial system in a dedicated virtual network and host the remaining servers in a separate virtual network. Or use a single subnet for the financial system and separate subnets for other servers within the same virtual network. Okay, the right answer would be to deploy the financial system in a dedicated virtual network and then host the remaining servers in a separate virtual network. And using separate virtual networks, it will provide you with strong isolation at the network level, also reduced attack surface, and better control over connectivity. Yeah. For example, Fin server, then virtual network A is isolated. Other servers, virtual network B. Yeah, cool stuff. Communication only will be allowed if explicitly configured. Right, we are going to move to the next question, 32. A company hosts multiple applications across several subnets within a single virtual network in Microsoft Azure. The security team wants to centrally control and inspect all outbound and inbound traffic, apply consistent network rules across all subnets, avoid deploying separate security solutions for each subnet. Which design should be implemented? Use Azure Load Balancer to filter and control traffic, deploy a firewall instance in each subnet separately, deploy a single centralized firewall solution to manage traffic for all subnets, or configure individual network security groups for each subnet only. Well, the right answer here, guys, will be to deploy a single centralized firewall solution to manage traffic for all subnets. And using one centralized Azure firewall allows unified traffic inspection, centralized rule management, and reduced complexity and cost. Example, instead of firewall per subnet, you use one Azure firewall. It will route all traffic through it. Other options: configure individual network security groups for each subnet only. NSGs, they provide basic filtering, but lack advanced inspection and centralized control. Deploy a firewall instance in each subnet separately. So this increases costs and complexity. It's not necessary here. Use Azure Load Balancer to filter and control traffic. Load Balancer distributes traffic but does not perform firewall level inspection, guys. So we're moving on now to the question 33. An administrator needs to quickly review resource configurations, monitor usage, and make changes to services in Microsoft Azure using a graphical interface without relying on command line tools or scripts. Which interface should the administrator use? Azure Portal, Azure PowerShell, Azure SLI, or Azure CLI, excuse me, guys, Azure Cloud Shell. Azure Portal is the right answer here. The Azure Portal, this is basically a web-based GUI that allows you to manage resources visually, monitor services, and configure settings without writing any code. You can open a virtual machine, change settings, restart, view metrics, all directly from your browser. Azure CLI, this is require command line input and scripting. Azure Cloud Shell provides CLI. PowerShell in a browser, still command line based, and Azure PowerShell, this basically will require some kind of scripting knowledge, and it is not GUI based. A company collects millions of telemetry events per second from Internet of Things devices and application logs into Microsoft Azure. The solution here must ingest large volumes of streaming data in real time, handle high throughput with low latency, allow multiple consumers to process the data independently. Which Azure service should be used? Azure Service Bus, Azure Query Storage, Azure Event Hubs, or Azure Logic Apps? Azure Event Hubs. So Event Hubs is designed for big data streaming ingestion, handling millions of events per second and supporting multiple consumers. For example, IoT devices send telemetry. Event Hubs collects and streams data. Consumers, analytics, monitoring, storage. Yeah, you get it? Azure Bus Service is used for enterprise messaging. Yeah. Azure Query Storage. This is a simple message queue, not suitable for real-time large-scale event streaming. And Logic Apps, it is used for workflow automation. A company needs to analyze large volumes of structured data stored in Microsoft Azure. The solution here must support complex queries across massive data sets, be optimized for analytical workloads, provide high-performance data processing for reporting and business intelligence. And now we are looking for services, two services that should company must use to according to our requirements. So which Azure services should the company use? We need to select two answers. Azure Cosmos DB, Azure Synapse Analytics, Azure SQL Database, and Azure SQL Managed Instance. Right. Azure SQL Database will be the one in Azure Synapse. Analytics. So Synapse Analytics, this is the modern name for Azure SQL Data Warehouse, and it is designed for large-scale analytics, data warehousing, and high-performance queries on big datasets. And we have Azure SQL Database can also support analytical workloads, especially smaller scale or combined OLTP plus analytics scenarios. Other options, Azure Cosmos DB. This is used for globally distributed NoSQL workloads. We have Azure SQL Managed Instance. This is designed for compatibility with on-prem SQL Server. A development team needs to quickly provision and manage multiple virtual machines in Microsoft Azure for testing purposes. The solution must allow rapid environment creation and deletion, enforce cost control policies, auto shutdown usage limits, and provide pre-configured templates for developers. Which Azure service should be used? Azure Virtual Machine Scale Sets, Azure App Service, Azure Automation, Azure Dev Test Labs. Azure Dev Test Labs is the right answer. So this service, this feature is designed for creating development and testing environments quickly, controlling costs with policies, and using reusable VM templates. When you use these Dev Test Labs, the developers, they can spin up a virtual machine in minutes, automatically shut it down at night, and avoid unnecessary costs. Let's have a look at the incorrect options, such as Azure Virtual Machine Scale Sets. This is used for scaling production workloads. Azure App Service used to host web application, and Azure Automation, this is used for task automation. Right, we have a few questions with statements. We need to decide if they are correct or not. A hybrid cloud model requires an organization to completely replace its private infrastructure with public cloud resources. Is this right or wrong? That is a no, guys. Hybrid cloud means combining on-premises private cloud with public cloud, not replacing it. Move on to 37. An organization can use public cloud resources to temporarily increase capacity beyond what its on-premises infrastructure can handle. Well, this is a yes. That's true. This is called cloud bursting, where public cloud extends internal resources during high demand. Resources deployed in a public cloud environment are accessible only to external users and cannot be used by internal company users. Yes or no? Well, this is a no here. So public cloud resources, they can be accessed by internal, external users depending on the configuration. And a hybrid cloud deployment allows workloads to be distributed between on-premises infrastructure and Microsoft Azure while maintaining connectivity between them. Yes or no? Well, that will be true. That will be yes. And, well, wait. Yeah, hybrid cloud integrates on-premises systems and Azure resources with security connectivity. Last question, question 40. A company deploys resources in Microsoft Azure across multiple departments. The governance team needs to ensure that only specific virtual machine sizes can be deployed. Resources must include mandatory tags, department, and environment. Non-compliant resources are either denied at deployment or flagged automatically. The solution must enforce these rules consistently across all subscriptions without manual intervention. Which Azure feature should be used? Resource logs, Azure Policy, Azure Resource Manager templates, or network security groups? What do you think, guys? Which one is the right answer? That will be Azure Policy. So, Azure Policy is used to enforce rules, guys. When you hear policy, enforcing rules and standards across resources, deny or audit non-compliant deployments, ensure consistency across subscriptions and resource groups. For example, we can create a policy, only allow virtual machine size standard B2S, yeah? Require tag environment before deployment. If not met, deployment is denied or flagged, yeah? Azure Resource Manager templates. This is used for deployment automation, resource logs, prevent deletion or modification, and we have NSG groups. They control network traffic. That's it, guys. Thank you very much for sticking to the end of the video. If you have sticked really to this point, I want to know. And if you paste a thumbs up emoji in the comments, then I'll be very, very happy. And I will know that you have stayed till the end. And I really, really do appreciate that. Thank you very much, guys. Let me know in the comments what also other exams are you studying. Do you want more practice questions for this or something else? See you on the next one.